Welcome to Business Spotlight. Today, I'm really delighted to be joined by Bob Jones, who is the co-founder of High Spirit. I'm not going to go into the details of exactly what Bob does. I'm going to hand over to Bob to ask you, Bob, just tell us a little bit about your business, what it does, and where you're based.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so High Spirit is, in the short version, a brand design and communications agency. We were founded just 18 months ago in 2022, and the emergence of High Spirit really kind of came out of the COVID experience, really, having worked in both agencies and in-house within kind of global brand marketing. It kind of emerged as an opportunity, really, within our client sector that me and my co-founder Dave both had experience in. We saw a massive gap between big network agencies and some of the more kind of, I guess, established brand consultancies. So High Spirit kind of emerged from the lived experience of working both in-house and out of house in kind of independent creative agencies. And yeah, here we are, sort of 18 months in. Happy to be here to talk to you.
Okay, great stuff. You've mentioned there about your own experiences of working in different types of agencies, different types of organizations. What is it that's different about High Spirit? What makes you stand out from other businesses in this sector?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a question we get asked a lot, actually, because obviously creative agency land is quite saturated, and it is quite hard looking in through the window and sort of identifying the points of difference. I guess sort of having worked in some smaller boutique agencies and then going in-house, the main reason for setting up High Spirit was that we saw a lot of kind of opportunities and creative conversations dropping away between the high-level advertising agencies and then the specialized service providers. So your kind of more your brand studios, your SEO specialists, your packaging agencies, loads of brilliant talent, but nobody really talking to each other. So you'd have briefs kind of kicking around from one studio to the next, and essentially opportunity and work sort of falling between chairs because there wasn't really a single centrifugal conversation happening. And kind of sadly, really, a sort of missed opportunity, really, where lots of companies who have a shared agenda to do great creative work weren't really talking to each other. It's I think it's often the case that we're all busy with our heads down and we're not really looking at the kind of more holistic brand opportunities. So quite often, and I saw this a lot when I was working in Bacardi Global Brands, you have lots of brilliant companies in their own right, but actually they don't really collaborate in the true sense of the word. So High Spirit was essentially trying to sort of look at a solution for that for the lifestyle brand sector. So we both have a lot of shared experience across spirits, hospitality, sports marketing, all the kind of things that you like to sort of, like we always say, like eat, sleep, wear, and do. So things that kind of affect your everyday life. So we saw lots of great, obviously this is a very saturated marketplace as well in its own right. And we see a lot of brand agencies doing fantastic comms work. But quite often there are gaps in that journey, especially for the consumer. So you might have an amazing purchasing experience, but then you go online after the sale and actually their online presence is awful, or their digital presence is very not up to scratch. So we're very much looking at clients through a kind of a more of a holistic lens, looking at all of their touch points. And I guess the watch out is that a lot of our agencies say that they're full service, but it's very difficult today to be excellent across all of those touch points. But what we can do is offer a kind of strategic strategy and solution that kind of gives you a little bit more direction and oversight through all of those channels. And we try to sort of not get caught up in being sort of answers to all of the problems, but what we can do is offer experience and directional support through that journey and make sure that there is someone catching the drop balls and someone who can actually guide you and fill the gaps where other specialists may be not interested or able to kind of oversee and essentially facilitate those solutions to those problems. So that was a long answer to a short question. I realize.
No, it's good. It gives a good overview, fantastic overview. So what's your business journey been like to date in the time that you've been a business owner?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like I say, 18 months, so quite short so far as a sort of independent business owner. Dave and myself had both worked for around 15 years in the kind of creative sector. So we're kind of standing on some slightly more mature shoulders, which was good. And we had both sort of worked together previously. So we kind of came out the traps quite quickly. We managed to turn where I worked into a client. So that was a great kind of foundational piece. So we still work with Bacardi Global Brands today, and that's been a sort of cornerstone of our business. But like any new business, you're sort of wrestling with the challenge of being new in a very saturated marketplace to the point we just made, like, what is our competitive advantage? And the other challenge is having the evidence to back that up. So we both have quite decent portfolios, but obviously behind that, when you're first starting, there's a lack of a team, a bricks and mortar space, and new work to sort of basically propel you forward. And I would say the first 12 months is very much a grunt and a grind, because you're working from project to project, client to client, trying to build up the revenue, trying to build up the trust with the people that are willing to sort of stand by you. And I'd say it's over the last sort of 3 months, it's really started to turn and start to become more of a self-propelling machine, as it were. And it's taken time, but I don't think any business can really go forwards and skip that first bit, because that's the real kind of learning curve, and you're putting meat on the bone really of the idea and the vision you have, trying to sort of make sure that everything works, and it is a test and learn, and there's obviously some failure in that as well.
So what would you say your biggest learning has been to date as a business owner?
I think, and this is probably kind of a repeated theme, is to sort of be choiceful about who you work with. I think, and also to back yourself, because I think often it's very easy to say yes to everything, and often that can be to the detriment of your own exploits and your staff as well, because often they are the ones that are in the engine room doing the hard graft. I think we're still a relatively small team. We're less than 10, but when it comes down to it, if people aren't enjoying what they're working on, or the client is being difficult and it doesn't level out in kind of cost benefit, then ultimately everyone feels a bit sour and tired by the end of that process. And it often, with bad clients, it often goes on. The project often lasts much longer than a good client. And it's hard to see that coming down the track when you're young and ambitious. You sort of sometimes forego some of the due diligence to kind of get things moving. So I think taking a pause to weigh up the proposition and the opportunity in a little bit more granular detail saves you a lot more energy and benefits you a lot more in the long run.
You mentioned there about team, and you say you're less than 10 people, so still quite a small team where individuals can have a big impact on those around them in terms of culture, in terms of working environment. What qualities do you look for in employees? I mean, how do you foster that positive working relationship, working environment?
That's a really good question, because being primarily a kind of design services business, we've had to sort of navigate post-COVID expectations. So with that, I mean that a lot of people now expect to be able to work flexibly, but for us, being here and present in the dialogue and in the conversation with co-workers, but also the clients, is very important. So we're constantly trying to find people that are interested in investing their time not only in the work but also in the culture that we're trying to build. And I think this is probably a problem or challenge that every business is facing at the moment, unless you're a kind of in manufacturing or something where you physically have to be there to do the work. We are essentially an office-based service provider, so it's very easy for people to sit behind a laptop at 50 miles away, but that doesn't kind of convert to great work. And we have to nurture those people, and they have to sort of trust us as well, that we're going to take them into a sort of more positive place, be that financially or from a kind of mentoring point of view. So it's been hard trying to find good people, because we are geographically out of London as well. That's also adding to that kind of macro micro challenge. And ultimately we're looking for people that have, I'd say it's probably maybe this, I don't know if this is controversial, but we're looking more at personality than the work a lot of the time, because we can teach and support people and mentor them in how to be better designers, but it's very hard to change their attitude and their personality. And so much of what we do is about communication and talking to each other and being able to articulate our vision and ideas to ourselves and to each other, but also to our clients. So we've employed someone recently who is quite outside of our sector, in a kind of project direction management role, and she's a fantastic people person. And everything else can be added on, after the fact. We just love her energy, her general kind of perspective on the outlook of what we're doing, and also just her awareness of business culture as a whole is just adding huge amounts of energy and value to what we're doing. So it's a really hard thing to do. I think hiring is obviously extremely time consuming as well. So we tread carefully towards new hires and make sure that we're writing really good outline, prospectuses of what the opportunity is and how we want to work together, because it's not enough to just be a transactional employee these days. There needs to be more for them to buy into.
Michael Gerber, who wrote a book called The E-Myth, talks about going into business ownership as being a move whereby you have to shift from being a technician, somebody who's doing what you do, to being a manager and an entrepreneur. You have to go from wearing one hat to wearing three. How would you say that you've dealt with that shift in taking on those two other roles?
That's a very good, well-pointed question. I sort of absorb. Obviously, I have Dave as my co-founder. He's the creative director, so we've made a conscious effort to divide our roles and try not to step on each other's toes. But like I said, in the first 12 months, you're wearing all the hats. Your HR, your finance, your design director, you're running projects as well. That's taken time for us to sort of maneuver and manipulate. And I think every business probably has a different makeup in terms of the ratios and time spent on different tasks. But we've got to a point now where I am looking more at the high level strategy, and I'm looking more at the sort of front end of the business and where we're going, whereas Dave is more on the delivery. And It's not to say that we won't cross over and dip into like points of view on each, but I think we identify quite early that we need to sort of stay in our lane, otherwise it gets chaotic. It's also confusing as a client or as an external who to talk to, because if you're getting email replies from both sides, but then I suddenly disappear for 2 weeks, it just doesn't make sense. So we're being very mindful of the importance of those roles. And I think it's a classic mistake actually of creative agencies particularly, is that they fall into the trap of thinking that they can do it all. I've worked in agencies where director founders without partners have often tried to do everything. They're very reluctant to take on expertise that is essentially kind of doubling up on their role. So much that often comes at the detriment of the staff and the employees, because if you don't have specialists to kind of start absorbing some of those more technical, time-consuming roles, whether it's financial directors, HRs, further kind of creative directional support as well, I think ultimately it just holds the business back. And we're already sort of looking at our pipeline for 24 and the roles that we want to build into the senior management team that allow us to sort of breathe and space that time out.
Okay, so what have you learned about yourself during your business journey?
I've learned to be more organized. I think you sort of go into it very romantically, and it's going to be hard work, but I don't, it's probably again a cliche to say, I don't think anyone prepares you for the hard work. I would say that we're touch wood, we're not staying up late doing crazy hours, but the buck stops with you. And I think ultimately you grow up a lot in that, especially in that first 18 months, where it's not only about making sure there's enough revenue coming in to sort of pay the bills and pay yourself. It's also about thinking like a chess player 2-3 steps ahead. You need to sort of wake up on a Monday and know what's happening in 3 weeks' time. It's not enough to just sort of wake up and deliver the project and wait for the next thing to happen. We have to sort of constantly be filling the pipeline with future things. And I think that's the other thing about post-COVID. Decisions are being made later, more reactively. So it's, as a project-based kind of service business, that's more volatile as a market. So we have to work more aggressively on our pipeline. So that's often, for me, primarily my personal role is more about managing that inflow and outflow. So I've come more and more away from the creative delivery side of the business. I still get involved in the strategy and the kind of vision pieces for the clients, because that's what I've done a lot of previously, but I'm definitely thinking more about where we're going to be in sort of 6, 18, 24 months, and what are the potential pitfalls or opportunities that are going to get us there or kind of trip us up. So yeah, I think it's a never-ending challenge, and I like it. I find it. I wake up and I look forward to it because it's exciting and you're building something and it's never the same. I think that's the big difference between being employee to kind of business kind of manager or business leader. You're in control of it. So ultimately, if it falls down, the buck stops with you. You know.
So if you were to meet somebody who's had a similar sort of career path to yourself and is looking to start up by themselves or with a co-founder, as indeed you did, what advice would you give to them based upon what you've learned so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, again, it's a saturated market, and there's a big trend actually of big kind of senior agency people moving out and setting up their own kind of boutiques. And this is going to probably continue now for the next few years because of the way the landscape is shaped and clients looking to make great work on sort of more cost efficient budgets. I think my advice would be focused on what you're good at. Be really confident in your own ability, but also be really clear about what the point of difference is. And then that's not to say that you have to be specialist and really niche. It's more about being clear about what you're offering them in terms of a service. I think we talk a lot about being a creative agency rather than a branding agency, because for us, being a branding agency feels quite nostalgic and old-fashioned, and it feels quite singular. Whereas being a creative agency allows us to be more holistic and more broad, and it means that we can work through the marketing mix. We're not trying to just solve your logo and your kind of brand kit of parts. We're trying to sort of do that, but also help that activate in market. And that's a lot of what Dave and I have sort of done over our careers. Is it's about often creating the brand is the fun bit, but actually making it work and creating that consistency over long term to help drive growth and help sort of deliver long-term consistency and change. That's the hard work. That's the grunt work that a lot of people sort of forget about. And I think a lot of agencies focus on the glamorous stuff, but it's much more about the kind of consistency and showing up every time in the same place in the right way. And yeah, I believe if people are starting up today, it's harder than ever to sort of make it work. And I don't think there's no easy way through. But obviously, one of the big things that everyone always says is to leverage your network. And I think for us, a lot of our work still comes from word of mouth and repeat business and people that we've met through our careers. You know, it's not to be underestimated, the value of leaning into your kind of experience and your network. So yeah, I think there's no cheat sheet or shortcuts, that's for sure.
So thinking ahead, what does the future look like for you and for High Spirit, and what do you see as the main challenges in achieving that?
The main objective is to, I guess, ground our business in the UK and and sort of fortify the team and offer here in Brighton, and with some satellite support within London, because that's a constant sort of connection that we have. And then beyond that, we've talked about European, sort of putting boots down in Europe, as it were, and having people on the ground, because a lot of our clients have an international reach. We've already got a couple of US clients as well. So it's about sort of controlled expansion. And I think, again, it's not as easy as it was sort of 15 years ago to sort of set up offices all over the world and just scale up quickly. We have to do it in a very considered manner. And we have to make sure that we're offering something that is different to what the local suppliers are already offering again. So I think there's a fluency and a trajectory of growth, but it needs to be done in a measured way. And what we've, as I sort of said before, considering that we want to be a more holistic agency, is starting to bring on the expertise that helps us deliver that vision and that ambition. And we kind of straddle brand and marketing, so we're looking to bring in some more kind of marketeer expertise, because I think a lot of creative agencies weigh heavy on brands, design, creative strategy, but they often forget to think how they don't often empathize with how marketeers think and how they act and how they behave and the way that they expect things to be presented and to be worked. Everything that I've noticed over the last 18 months actually is that brands are becoming much smarter and savvier in terms of working their budget harder, and also being more people being more accountable to the spend. So I think it's important that we bring in the expertise that helps us manage the expectations around ROI, and also just help nurture those relationships from a perspective of experience, because it's very easy to say, oh, we're experts in marketing, but if we've got no one here who's ever worked in marketing, it's hard to justify, you know. So I think that's sort of me sort of building out my side of the team a little bit more, as well as the design side.
So you mentioned there about some challenges, or certainly greater challenges than there used to be, with overseas expansion. You talked there as well about having to recruit people from a different skill set from those that are already in the organization. How do you see those bearing out as actual challenges on the ground? What is it that you will need to overcome, either as an individual or as a team, in order to come up, to get over those challenges?
Well, yeah, well, I think with regional expansion, you need someone who has lived in that market. Well, I was talking to another agency owner yesterday, and they've just gone into South Africa, and by that he means that he's got an amazing guy who he used to work with, who's from South Africa, and he's now gone back to South Africa. Having someone who you can trust is obviously completely inherently connected to this being a success. I think it's foolish to think that you can just go in and stick a flag up and off you go. You know, there's so many businesses already succeeding in that market. What makes you think that you are better or stronger than they are? Because they understand the culture, they understand the people, they understand the mindset and the insights. So to sort of rinse and repeat what we're doing here for different markets is not, it's not as kind of easy as that. But there are obviously global network agencies that are doing that, and they are doing it well, and they're driving efficiency with it. So for us to come in at the bottom and sort of establish ourselves is going to be extremely challenging. But I think ultimately it comes down to relationships and bringing in people that are already there, they're already doing it, and they're able to sort of, they see something in our vision and our way of doing things that is different and interesting and exciting to them. Because I think we're in a sort of interesting transformational state with a lot of creative agencies, where a lot of talent's leaving these big household agencies because they're kind of fed up with the hierarchy in the system. And there's never been a more kind of fluid time for people to challenge the status quo. And I think the same for brands. They're looking for better, more efficient ways of working. And they're looking for partners that are willing to be more agile and more flexible. And that's not to say you have to work all hours of the day. It's more that I just think business is changing now. Like we are here, we're talking via Zoom, and everything's efficient, you know, and we know where we stand. And I think brand owners don't want to waste time anymore, and they want to work with people that can think on their behalf and think faster.
When we think about, well, not necessarily the industry, when we think about outside influences, and where we get our inspiration from, what is it or who is it that inspires you at the moment?
Good question. Well, I think culture, well, we both kind of lived and sort of worked through a lot of kind of cultural projects, and I'm a massive fan of music and film, and I always look, and it sounds kind of cliche in a way, but I think I always try and look outside of design, because I think you can kind of trap yourself in a bit of web of sort of staring at your competition and never really kind of superseding it. So yeah, we try and get out as much as we can to sort of see the world outside of the design world, because actually it all has an impact on what we do. There was an amazing project actually when I was younger, actually some peers of mine at university, and it was all about the sentiment that actually design is everything. And they did this beautiful piece of work where they took essentially the branding and the design of everyday items, and they kind of created an exhibit of these blank canvases. So everything from bleach to cars to toilet paper, you know, like actually if it hadn't been designed and it hadn't been sort of thought through and carefully curated, it wouldn't exist, and we wouldn't have a feeling towards it. And I feel like you can find that inspiration wherever you go, you know. Like I enjoy looking at everything from a slightly different angle, whatever it is, whether it's kind of going for a walk down the beach or going to something that's very kind of exhibition led and more loaded. So yeah, I think that curiosity comes in from all sides.
That's fantastic. Well, look, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking to you. Really interesting to hear your story. I'm sure that anybody that watches this is going to be inspired by the success that you've had and how you've gone about getting there. And I'm sure they'll share the excitement for how
Thank you.
High Spirit is going to develop. Just
Thank you.
before we finish off, I just wanted to ask, is there any additional news or information about High Spirit that you'd like to use this opportunity to tell people about?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, like all companies, we have a website and we have social. So highspirit.agency is our website. Feel free to check us out. It's like all things, it's work in progress. So it's a site that gives you a little bit, but not a lot. And if you'd like to hear more, we'd be happy to talk to you offline. And the same on social, highspirit.agency. So yeah, we're always open to discuss anything that anyone wants to chat about. But yeah, I really appreciate your time, Tom. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's been lovely having you on this series, and best of luck for the future.
Thank you. Take care, Tom.
Cheers. Bye now.
Bye.